So let's start with how you know one another and what made you want to be a part of today's conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. So first of all, I'm so honored to be here. I love what Brand Innovators does to connect marketers all around the world. I was lucky enough to be nominated as a 40 under 40 this year. And I have brought with me two amazing colleagues, Monique and Lauren, and they'll tell you about themselves. I've been in marketing for 17 years. And spent half my career agency side in the creative world, and then 7 years at Stanley Black Decker doing creative, digital, and now brand marketing. So I'm so pumped to talk today, and I'll kick it over to Monique to introduce herself.
Thank you, Anne. Takes a minute to actually turn yourself off mute. You would think 2 years into this, I would be better at it. But I am Monique Evans, and I have had the pleasure of working with Anne throughout her years at Stanley Black Decker. We kind of overlap every once in a while, but I have been with SBD for 12 years now, which is crazy for me to say. I started as a graphic designer and kind of traveled throughout that world until I became a project coordinator, then a systems analyst, and whatever I am today. It's kind of a hybrid of many different hats.
Love that.
And hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Gallager. I've actually been with SBD for about 2.5 years now. Previously, I spent about 10 years in the Baltimore ad agency space, working with Anne in a few different settings, actually a few different companies. And I've had the chance to work with Monique, you know what I mean, in our roles now. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, Forbes recently recognized Stanley Black Decker as a top female-friendly company. Can you share what it's like to be a part of this organization?
Yeah, great. So being with the company almost 7 years, I've seen some incredible transformation, especially in the last 2 years. I would say that we have some of the most exceptional female leaders who have recently taken on roles as presidents in the GTS business, which is the division that Monique and Lauren and I all sit in. And I think that Stanley Black Decker has done an incredible job with diversity, equity, and inclusion, integrating ERG groups and really helping us all bring our whole selves to work. I personally am involved in the Women's Network, which also connects very closely with the Working Parents Group, and that's for anybody who's a parent. And then I'm a board member of the Pride and Allies group. So it's an awesome way to connect with people outside of the day-to-day, especially in Zoom world where you're not in an office anymore. And it's an amazing way to create connections with people to build your personal board of directors, which I can talk about a little more later.
Awesome.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Anne, just because I've seen that transformation as well, being here for so long. And the ERGs, a lot of companies didn't have ERGs 10 years ago, right? Like that wasn't even a term that people knew. But those have brought so many folks together, and I'm also a part of a few. And the beauty of it is that you can also be an ally. So even if you aren't a part of that group yourself, you probably have friends or coworkers that are, so you're able to join those groups and kind of learn how to just be better for those and more supportive for those individuals. I think the other thing that I just wanted to add, kind of like what Anne said with like the leaders being present, it's sometimes you join a company and you see, oh, my manager is a woman, but you don't really see anyone in like that high level that is female. So you kind of decide, okay, that's where my ceiling is. I probably will only make it to director here, and then I'm going to have to go elsewhere. So the fact that you see these women that have had long careers throughout and they've actually moved up into president, it allows you to be like, okay, I can grow, and this is my forever home, if you will.
That actually was one of the first things that I realized about the company, that I, had a different bias when I was coming in. I thought that there would be a lot of male dominance in here, given the space and the industry that we're in, but it seeing how many female leaders we had was kind of very surprising and exciting to me, because to Monique's point, I feel like there's so much opportunity to grow and there is no kind of ceiling of where you can go.
That's incredible. So for those who might not yet have these top-down initiatives at their respective workplaces, what would you suggest they do to help women in marketing?
I think that if you're gonna, try to instill change, or change is scary to everybody, and especially trying to think about organizational change and shift, I think there's small things you can do. Lead by example. So I think if you're, pitching or proposing something, that you can kind of put that into practice in small ways so that you can kind of baby step your way into kind of getting people to buy in. So if you're talking about flexibility for working parents, if you have the opportunity and you're managing people that are parents, see about a flexible work day, see about, do they have a day where they don't have any Zoom meetings so that they can kind of pick up their kids or things like that. So I think there's small ways that you can put that into practice and represent those kind of things that you're trying to work through.
I would add to that too, Lauren. I love what you were saying. We have a leader at Stanley Black Decker. Her name is Tracy Myers, and she founded our very first internal studio team in the marketing group. And Tracy says, you permit what you promote, which means, if you're telling, as a leader, you're telling your staff that they shouldn't work nights and weekends, and then you're working nights and weekends, it sets a really bad example. And so, I think it's really important for folks to set boundaries and politely remind folks of those boundaries. We have a really great cultural rollout that we did last year called Focus Fridays. So in corporate America, this was something I had to get used to many years ago. Our schedules are nuts. Today alone, I have 9 meetings. This is my 5th meeting of the day.
Wow.
And so what's so beautiful about Focus Fridays as a corporate initiative is they encourage us not to have meetings on Fridays and to really focus on ourselves, focus on continuing development, continuing education. We have all kinds of amazing online learning platforms that Stanley Black Decker offers us complimentary. Monique and I have actually taken a couple together. So it's really important that, like, if the business gives you an opportunity, that you take it and you don't, accept meetings on Fridays when people send you meetings. And sometimes that's really hard to do, but it goes back to that discipline thing and that setting expectations.
What's this I hear about Outlook calendars and the default settings for meetings?
Yeah, so that's a new thing, but I love it. It's one of those where, again, respecting those boundaries and hours, and corporate actually took it upon themselves not only to say, like, you should start having shorter meetings. That's easy to say, and people are like, okay, yeah, sure. But they actually worked with IT, and we now, whenever we make a meeting, it defaults, like if you're trying to do a half hour, it defaults to 25 minutes. You have to actually intentionally type in 1:30 in order to get that extra 5 minutes. Same if you're trying to do an hour meeting, it defaults to like 45 minutes. So the fact that our company is instilling, not just saying make a shorter meeting, but they actually made it more difficult for you to have an hour-long meeting, which in Anne's case, when you have 9 meetings in a day, which I would never do that to myself, but more power to you.
I was on vacation last week, so I'm, catching up.
But yeah, at least now she can get a 5-minute bathroom break and a 15-minute break in between that 45 minutes to actually like be a human again.
Yeah.
That is so awesome.
I was going to say too, they also added kind of a forced agenda so that you have to explain what the meeting is about and what the expectations are, which I remember talking to Monique a while back, and she said, if you send me a meeting invite with no context and no details, I can't prioritize that. And so that's one of those boundaries I think that Anne was referencing, where, our company is supporting those types of, cultural initiatives to say, I have boundaries, like we have to be clear with each other and respect all of the time in the 9 meetings that you have throughout the day.
Yeah. And I will say that it's hard to set up those boundaries, right? Like I am someone, as Lauren has said, that has strong work boundaries and people know it and they respect it now, but it wasn't always that way. You have to build them up and then also adhere to it. As soon as you start making exceptions, like, I decided last year that I wasn't going to do meetings on Mondays anymore. I was like, Focus Fridays are great, but I also need days that I can just devote to getting my job done. So, the first couple of meetings come in and you're like, oh, it's only a half hour. I'll just take it. It's fine. Maybe they didn't notice that it's in my email signature, but like, no, I actually had to make that boundary with myself to be like, hey, this meeting, like, can we move it to Tuesday? I see, and I'll do the work of being like, there's an opening Tuesday at 3:00. Let's move it to that. So at least, I'm not just saying like, nope, it's Monday, I don't do that meeting. I do work with them, but I still respect my own boundary of not having a Monday meeting.
That's great. How do you think about advocacy and how for yourself, and how do you continue to push you and others on the team?
I think this is a really interesting question. And actually the three of us were talking about it before because it's really hard. I think it's hard to kind of promote yourself and it feels a little bit selfish. And I think as women, we tend to want to build others up and we take on all these things, but we feel like it's wrong in some way or that it kind of is, again, selfish if we're self-advocating. So I think, there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of like courses, personal development, how do you handle some of those things? And one thing that I try to do is, I would go to bat for Monique and Anne to say, hey, I've advocated for them and said they deserve this, they'd be great for this project. So I try to separate myself a little bit and say, if this was my friend or this was my peer, what would I be saying about them? I shouldn't change or manipulate that because, it's less comfortable. So I think kind of trying to make sure that what would you say if that was your peer that needed that advocacy?
We're so much harder on ourselves than others always. For me, I think something that's been really helpful in my career too is to build your own personal board of directors. So, I think about our Stanley Black Decker board of directors and how that works and how much support we get from them as a company. In my career, I found that having support at a peer level, at a senior executive level really helps to not only mentor, but also advocate for. And Monique, you've talked about this a lot. Just getting the support to have somebody be a sounding board for you, but also speak on your behalf is critical when you know what you want. And so, one of the best things I did for myself was sit down and take some time and determine, what I really want to do in 5 years. And I refer to it as, what do you want to be when you grow up? So one of our presidents at Stanley Black Decker, her name is Allison Nicolaitis. She's the president of our power tools business in GTS. She says it's really important to define what you want, because if you don't know what you want, other people aren't going to know. And if you don't know how to talk about it, other people can't advocate for you. So I think that is critical, and it has really helped me shift my career. I actually took a note from the last session. Rashi talked about career growth and it being more of a jungle gym than a ladder. And for me, I've thought of it a lot in the last 2 years with COVID as like kind of a playground in general, because I was a creative for many, many years and managed creative teams. And when COVID hit and I couldn't see my friends anymore and I had no social life, I was like, I think I'm going to go back to school. And what am I going to do in school? So, I decided after, really thinking about it and talking to some leaders that I really admire, that I want to be a CMO when I grow up. And that's scary. Like, that's really scary to say out loud. And I can't do that today. I can't go, I need more experience in a couple key areas. I'm currently taking an accounting class, and that's actually fun. I'm like, what? But I think when you know what you want, you don't have to know how to get there. You build support to help you understand what you need. And so I think that that's super, super critical.
How are you all thinking about sponsors in that area?
Monique. Yeah. I love sponsorship, right? Like so many books and TED Talks and things tell you about mentors and how important it is to have a mentor. And I'm not knocking mentorships. I'm a part of a mentorship program at SBD, but it is so vital to also seek sponsors. And your mentor could be your sponsor, but it doesn't have to be. And your sponsors are truly just the people that are in those rooms where you're not, and they're speaking well on your behalf. So kind of like what Lauren was saying, the fact that I know that if an opportunity comes up and she knows that I fit that characteristic, she can also say like, hey, did you think about Monique for that? Right? Like it's just as simple as that. And it kind of goes to what Anne was saying as well of, being intentional of what you want to be when you grow up. So that way you have people that are sponsoring you on your behalf, or at least advocating what you actually want in your life and not trying to send you down some path that you didn't want to go down. But it's like, oh, I guess this is the only thing I can do, which is no. But also kind of what else Anne was saying reminded me of my own journey, where like I have had many jobs at SBD where I was the only one who did it, and we kind of made up a title for it. So we didn't always have traffic managers or project managers or any type of organization when it comes to project management, which I'm sure is crazy to believe that a company this big, but we were able to work autonomously and everyone did their job, and you didn't really need the organization until you realized that you did. Where it's like, oh, this would be so much easier if your creative person could just focus on the creative and there was somebody else that's chasing down the deadlines and the missing information and all of that jazz. So, I was able to be one of the first traffic coordinators, which then became a project coordinator role, which now a couple iterations later, I'm managing like our project management system, which is not what graphic designer Monique thought was in her first at all, right? Like I was very happy of just doing layout design and that being my bread and butter until I retired or had to learn a new skill. But now I am like dreaming even bigger of like, well, where else can this go? What else is there in like this tech marketing space? Like, does that exist kind of thing? And maybe it doesn't, but I'm okay with being the first.
Well, you make such a good point where it's paving your own way. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't mean that it's not an opportunity.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that me and Lauren were talking about earlier today of just, if you think about it, the internet is not what the internet used to be when we were all in school, right? Like graphic design and digital design and now motion graphics and e-com, like e-com wasn't a word back then. So and Lauren now has an entire career around e-com. So like sometimes you do have to pave that way.
Yeah, I would say in terms of sponsorship too, depending on the size of your company or the business that you're in, it really does get important, especially in a company our size. We can't be in all the places, and, those types of sponsorships really bridge connections for you and kind of get your foot in the door. I know the role that I'm in now, Anne was the one who kind of put that idea in kind of a team's head, and I didn't even know it was available. So it's kind of having those sponsorships and having that support system and network is, critical.
And what areas of focus do you have currently, whether it be specific skill sets of focus, or tell me what that looks like?
So for me, my role right now is really focused on how we evolve our e-commerce content. So how can we start taking different technologies and infusing them into e-commerce? Can we use augmented reality? Can we have a more personalized interactive experience that connects with that end user? And then further from that, it's really, how do we actually measure that performance? Is our content working? Does it actually resonate with people? So figuring out how we test and optimize and can kind of continuously improve. And then I would say, personally, it's just been a good experience to see a different side of the business. when I first started, we were in that studio team that Anne mentioned that Tracy led earlier. And this has exposed me to a totally different side of the business. And so I'm brushing up on a lot of things that I did not think that I would be, from finance to kind of operating and things like that.
I have had the privilege this year of rebranding and relaunching a power tool brand. I never in a million years thought I would be as passionate about power tools as I am. This past fall, we relaunched the Porter Cable brand, which is a cordless power tool brand at a retailer all around the US called Tractor Supply Company. So we worked really closely with them to build a marketing campaign and launch this awesome product line to more people that are more DIY focused than pro. I'll say it that way. But what I love about our company is that if you can dream it up and you can articulate it, our leaders listen. And, you know, I feel like I have this side hustle that really keeps me driven at SBD, and that's building internal teams that I've either had experience managing or working with at agencies, or I see holes where there's opportunity and I get to help pitch to build those teams and run those teams. So if you can dream it, we have a really interested, engaged leadership team who is listening. And I think we've gone through a ton of transformation because our leaders listen, and, you know, we're always evolving. So I'll stick around as long as they'll have me. Like I couldn't ask for a better job right now. I'm so pumped to work where we do and to work with such amazing people like Lauren and Monique.
That's incredible. Let's talk vulnerability at work, and specifically vulnerability in women. What are your thoughts?
I used to look at vulnerability as almost kind of a drawback, and professionally speaking. You know, I think that I've experienced moments where asking questions in a role or a company actually kind of could be used against you. It could kind of make it seem like you didn't know what you were talking about, or you weren't kind of meant for that role. And, you know, especially coming here, I learned that's not true. Like, you need that vulnerability and you need to be open, and especially in a virtual environment, you have to build that trust and kind of get to know people on a more human level. So I think that vulnerability is a keystone to kind of getting success out of your team. So if you can build that relationship with the team and be open, and, you know, way back when I first started, you know, Monique is super busy and I had to work in this platform that she was managing. I've never used it before. And I just level set with her and said, hey, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I know you're really busy. I know that I am not on your priority list at all, but here's my situation. And like, I need your help so that I can be successful. And she was like, I got you. And so she took the time out, and she was like, because I was vulnerable, and I kind of went to her and said, I need your help, you know, or else it's going to hold me back. You know, she spent the time helping me build something and learn a different tool that would be successful for me. So like, that's a great example of how, if you can just be open and not be afraid of that it can really help, you know, change the trajectory and build relationships.
Yeah. And I think on the other side of that, right? Like, I had no idea that Lauren was like humbling herself and coming to me. Like, it's one of those things where for me, that's just another person that needed additional training, right? Like, I didn't see it as any sort of negative. There wasn't anything to like weaponize against her. And it was just like, you know, no, that's not like my A, B, or C, but it is somewhere on my list of like, if people aren't able to use this system, then the system itself doesn't work, right? So, you know, for me, it was one where like, of course I'll help you. Like, that's what I'm here for. So I think that's a great lesson for anyone that is hesitant to kind of, you know, raise their hand or ask that additional question, or just be frank and honest and be like, everything you just said went over my head. Can I get additional help? Because we don't know, we don't know, right? So if you're always sitting there nodding your head, then people are going to assume that you're following along. And so it's like, ask the question up front when there's still time to actually figure it out, instead of just be like, I guess I'll figure this out and I'll just do something. And then it's completely wrong. And everybody's time is now wasted. And it's a crunch and a rush and, all of those things that, of course, none of us have ever had to deal with before, which I personally have. So it's one where like, be vulnerable to ask those questions, but also like personally, when I look at like vulnerability, it's also authenticity, right? Of like bringing your full self. And, the example I give is like your first day of work, you probably were not your full self, right? You probably came back home or turned off Zoom and was just like, who was that person in that meeting? Like, I don't know them. That's not me. I don't know what that was. And, part of it's just nervousness, but also it's like, I don't really know these people. I don't know what the culture is. Am I going to fit in? Are they going to like me? So the more you can get out of your head, get out of your own way, and just, learn how to have that courage to really present yourself, the more like empowered you're going to be, because then you are your full self and you just kind of are just acting naturally.
Yeah, I was going to say vulnerability is really kind of like creating an environment for the other people, right, to be vulnerable with you as well. So, right, earlier on in my career, I had a situation where I needed to work with a dev team and say, we have to send out this email for this client at a certain time, and I dropped the ball. And I ran downstairs to our dev team and I said, hey, this is my fault. I dropped the ball in this. Do any of you guys have time to stick around and help me out? If you don't, I understand, but I kind of laid it out there for them again, and they were more than willing to help out because it humanizes things. And I think if you can lead by example, like I was talking about earlier, it really starts creating that kind of community where you guys have each other's back. And, it's kind of that you can kind of dig in and help out people.
Something we hear a lot at work is always assume positive intent. And I think both of your examples are a great show of that thought. If you're being authentic and you're assuming positive intent, we're all just here to help each other. We all work for the same guy. It's like the more positive and supportive we can be, the better. And I think that vulnerability and tough situations build strength and definitely help us grow. Vulnerability equals growth, period.
Yes, so true. What's a valuable takeaway that you've learned that you would want to pass on to others here today?
I can kick this one off. I was enrolled in a program a couple of years ago called Sherpa Coaching. Brenda Corbett created it. Awesome female leader, if anybody wants to look her up. But what I learned from executive coaching was that strengths and weaknesses can be similar. So one takeaway there was your strengths overused can be your biggest weaknesses. And then also, I think in business, it doesn't matter what you do for a job. It could be, I worked at a flower shop in high school and college. Now I work in marketing, running a brand. It's the same. Behaviors and skills are equally important. So you can be the smartest person in the room who knows all the things, but if you're an asshole to work with and you don't assume positive intent, you're not going to get anywhere. And so being collaborative and assuming positive intent and being self-motivated and looking for ways to problem solve rather than complain, those are all things that are just as important as knowing Excel and knowing how to balance a spreadsheet or Photoshop or whatever. I think what's so interesting as a leader that I've experienced is it's easier to teach someone a skill than it is to help someone change a behavior. And so the work is equal on both sides. It's just, different sets of skills.
Yeah. And why are you so awesome? Why do we have to go after you? But no, I completely agree with what you're saying. And that's something that I remind my friends a lot of, like, especially when they're applying for new jobs. Like, I think Lauren was the one who was telling me the stat of, like, most men will apply for a job if they check like 6 out of the 10 boxes on the list, whereas most women will not apply for that job unless they check all 10, which is crazy. But it's one of those, like, I remind my friends all the time where I'm like, you are qualified, and most of the time, like, your first 30 days is them teaching you how to do your job. Like, I'm not saying to go apply for something that you have no business being in that room, but I'm saying give yourself a little grace and time, and just know that, like, the ins and outs and the jargon and all of those things are teachable. But as what Anne was saying, like, your soft skills, those are the things that you can really develop and you bring with you. And that's what gives you that edge up among someone else. So, like, if both your resumes look exactly the same, you went to the same schools, you have the same degree, it's like, what else are we going to judge you on? And it's you as a person. Like, are you that self-starter? Are you the one that asks questions? Do you have the courage to be the only naysayer in the room? It's all those types of different things that aren't teachable in a way. Like, you can definitely take courses to learn how to kind of, like, boost those skills, but you have to figure out, like, what's intrinsically in you and how can I develop that and bring that out.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to take something away, one of the things that I learned, actually Anne had mentioned it to me when I started, but it's about bringing people along, right? So if you are, moving at warp speed and you assume that everybody understands what's happening behind you, you're probably missing something, or there's probably going to be a breakdown in some capacity. So I think bringing others along and slowing down enough to make sure that you're, kind of checking in with them and bringing them along to opportunities too. We were talking, Anne was going to be on this panel and she brought Monique and I along. She was like, this is a good opportunity. And so I think kind of slowing down, bringing other people along. And then to, I think, Monique's point earlier, a lot of roles that I've had in my career were roles that didn't really exist. They were like, this is a new thing. You can come in here and try to define it and things like that. And so I would say that, if don't try to limit yourself. If you see certain types of roles in your organization right now, it doesn't mean that you have to fit that role. If you see an opportunity, I think that, you can help shape that and mold that and figure out what makes the most sense. And, I guess the other thing would be that we're hard on ourselves, and sometimes 80% is good enough. It does not have to be perfect.
Amen.
Yes.
You can just close that PowerPoint and be like, I don't care that it's misaligned. It'll be perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be 100%. We've all got a lot going on in professionally and personally. So give yourself a break, give yourself some grace, and, shoot for higher than you think that you should be, because you definitely can do more.
Such good points. How do you describe your women mentors, and how have they helped you along the way?
I was going to say, Monique mentioned it. I'm in a mentorship program at SBD. It's been amazing because it connected me with somebody that I probably wouldn't have met, or to this point, definitely wouldn't have worked with. And she's been able to teach me so much about the business and just so much about kind of her career and things that worked really well for her. But I look at mentorship almost as kind of, you can have a lot of different mentors, even if it's not an official title. So I think it's important that you have mentors or people that you admire or that you go to for advice or bounce ideas off of as your peers, or, people that have been in a similar role. I think that looking at some of your friendships even as kind of mentors, where they've helped you along the way and given you advice. So whether it's a formal process or not, I think developing your network and identifying who are those people that you can go to for support, to talk through, to get advice on, what you should do. I think looking for mentorship is really important, because you should be continuing to learn and kind of grow. So it's been great for me.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about the mentorship program is I don't work with these people ever, right? Just like how Lauren said, like both of my mentors are actually in corporate. So they're in completely different business units than me. Like we would not cross paths unless it was this or at an ERG. But the beauty of it is because they're so distant from what my day-to-day is, they ask questions, and they ask questions from a fresh perspective because they honestly don't know. They're just like, well, why can't you do that? And it's like, wait, why can't we do that? Hold on. So it's one where you do get to learn a lot more about yourself and your process, as well as kind of hear another story of like, how did this person get to where they were? What was their story? What was their journey? Like, obviously, I'm not going to take a similar path as them because, you know, like one's in HR and I have no, I love HR. I appreciate HR, but that's not the place for me. Right. So, you know, I'm not seeking out the mentorship to be like, I want to be you when I grow up, but it's also nice to just be like, how did you get to where you are and what were those steps and what did that look like? Because you can have a similar journey that might look like a jungle gym.
There are 3 gals that I really lean on at SBD for support. I mentioned 2 already. The last is Christine Potter. She was just appointed president of the Outdoor Product Group recently. And between Allison, Tracy, and Christine, I think the common theme, they're all very different leaders. They're all very different from me. And the common thread that I see is that they always put people first. And it's something that makes me want to show up, and it makes me want to do good work because I know they have my back. And I think if more leaders could lead by example in that way, we'd all be better off.
Yeah, and lead with empathy too, you know, again, that human kind of aspect of we're all working here, but everybody has all the stressors outside of here as well. So I think like having leaders that lead with empathy, it makes a huge difference in your work-life balance and your day-to-day.
I do think that's a silver lining of COVID. I think there are a couple, but all things considered, I think COVID has allowed us to have more grace and allow each other to have more grace, because the world is a little bit in turmoil. Some of our leaders refer to it as a VUCA world, as a volatile place right now. And to just be able to meet people where they are, to bring the best version of themselves to work, is a discipline and something that I hope we all can do more of, because you never know what's happening at home. You never know.
Yeah.
And Monique, I think you've mentioned earlier, reminding ourselves to make time for others. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so it's one is where, you know, I can't say it enough, just being human. Like, we are all humans. We have these human, very complicated lives, but like, you know, like what Lauren said earlier, where she was hesitant to come up to me because I'm so busy, right? Like everyone, you can say that about everyone, right? We're all busy, but we're still human. So like, especially in this virtual world where you might not have the 5 minutes where you're warming up something at the microwave and someone else stops by and you start talking about a TV show or whatever, you can still replicate that in this virtual world. Like, you can send out a meme or just a hello or, hey, I saw this and I was thinking of you, via like Teams or Slack or Skype or whatever folks are using these days. And that goes such a long way, right? And if anyone, like, no one is too busy for that. Like, if you are so busy that you can't take 30 seconds to reply back, hey, that's a whole different issue that needs to be addressed, you know, in a different panel, but it definitely should be addressed.
Yeah, I think being virtual is just you being a little more intentional too, you know, being intentional, because we're all busy and going from meeting to meeting. So being intentional about saying, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. Like, how are you doing? How was that project you were working on? How was your holiday? So I think, to Monique's point, but it's just, you got to be intentional with making sure that you keep up those connections.
We have a question that I'll read here. What are some signals to look for in the interview process when assessing how female empowered the culture will be at an organization?
Yeah, I'll definitely take this one. So I always remind people that when you are interviewing, like you are also interviewing that company, right? So, when they ask, do you have any other questions? Like ask questions, like you are trying to figure out, or do you fit in just as much as they're trying to figure out, do you? And those are good times to just ask, like, what does your, upper leadership look like? Maybe you can do a little bit of research on LinkedIn or whatever as well, but just trying to understand not only what does work-life balance or work-life integration look like, but ask those questions that are key to you so that you can make sure that one, it's a place that you really want to wake up and go to or log into every morning.
It's just like the behaviors and skills thing. I mean, you've got your job requirements on that, job posting, but you also want to ask about the culture of the company, because cultural fit is really important too. Stanley Black Decker is really fast paced. That might not be for everybody. And so, you have to ask the right questions. I have this like 9-page document with a bunch of interviewer questions. They're all over the internet, so you can just search for it, but it'll give you some good ideas on certainly what to ask and how to ask it.
I would say too, figure out what values you're looking for in a company. What do you value the most? And then ask that question and see if that fits. If you value work-life balance, or you value, having a beer fridge at the office or something like that. Having fun. I mean, there's no wrong answer, but I think you need to make sure like you understand what your values are when you're going into that interview, so that you can make sure you're asking the questions to see if it aligns.
Well, thank you all for the conversation. This has been awesome.